This is just quick commentary on your take-home quiz. I wanted to go through these problems and just point out some common mistakes that I saw. Not reading you the entire thing, you can print off the PDF and then listen to the commentary. The first question had to do with the experiment to determine whether or not PremPro was effective in reducing cases of Alzheimer's. And so one of the main things that I noticed with this question that we didn't pay attention to the fact that these were groups or patients that were randomly assigned to groups, but there was really just one sample, and that one sample size was 4,532. So when we were trying to determine the independence, we needed to make sure that there were more than 45,320 women available for the study. We didn't need 22,660 to be available for each group, because the group was chosen and then the sample was chosen and then the patients were randomly assigned to the groups. The other thing you want to make sure that you are cognizant of is that you have to talk about independence between the groups, and randomly assigning the patients to the treatment groups takes care of that. In terms of verifying normality, for the proportions, for comparing proportions for a hypothesis test, we have to use p hat c, and p hat c also is used in verifying normality. Notice, because we split this sample in half went to PremPro, half went to placebo, that N1 p hat c, N2 p hat c are equal, and N1 1 minus p hat c, N2 1 minus p hat c are also equal. In the conclusion, make sure that you answer the question that was being asked. You don't want to say that we have sufficient evidence that the proportion on PremPro who developed dementia is equal to the proportion on the placebo. That's not what the researchers wanted to know. They wanted to know whether or not PremPro was an effective drug in reducing the cases of Alzheimer's. So you want to make sure that you discuss that in your conclusion. In Part B, you were just supposed to report the confidence interval. Many of you went through the process of verifying conditions and showing the formula, but pay attention to your verbs and just report it. Just give it to me. And then here is our famous question. We'll ask this one over and over again, what it means to be blank % confident. In this case, people were saying that we wanted to capture the true parameter or the true proportion, but that's not what we're interested in. What we're interested in is the true difference between those proportions of cases, PremPro versus placebo. So pay careful attention to that. Question 2 wasn't so bad. Across the board, we did relatively well. Just make sure that you are verifying conditions for both populations, and you'll see that here. Braking distances at each site. It is reasonable to assume that more than 100 and 120 drivers for sites 1 and 2 respectively. Normality for sample 1. Normality for sample 2. Also make sure that you are explaining very well, or providing a probability statement for your p-value. You have to tell me what the p-value represents. You can't just give me a number. Communicate to your reader exactly what's going on. You can see the decision here. We have sufficient evidence to conclude that the braking distances are, in fact, different because we rejected the null hypothesis. With the confidence interval, you can see that here. You can get that from your calculator. Just make sure you report the degrees of freedom. Again, I'm not going to require you to tell me T-star for these 2 sample t-tests. And then the question of how does this support the confidence interval? If their braking distances were the same, then we would see a value that tells us no difference, which is 0. But in our confidence interval, we don't see 0. We see all negative numbers. And according to the order that I subtracted in, it lets us know that site 1 has an average braking distance that's shorter than site 2. Question 3. My main concern was that this was treated as if it were a 2 sample t-test, and it's not. These cities were chosen, and the women in the labor force were matched based on the city from 2 different time periods. And so you really should have been concerned about the population of differences. And so providing 2 separate box plots, two separate normal probability plots was not acceptable for this particular problem. This box plot and this normal probability plot is based on the differences between women in the labor force from 1968 to 1972. The other thing, students went through the process of telling me randomization not met, independence is met, normality is cause for concern, but you never answered the question about whether or not the test was appropriate. Make sure that you read the question carefully and tell me the answer to the question that's posed. In actually performing the hypothesis test, if you treated it as a two-sample t-test, then what's going to happen is you're not going to use the correct formula, hence you're going to get an incorrect test statistic, an incorrect p-value, and you're going to use the incorrect degrees of freedom. Make sure you know the difference between independent and dependent t-tests and what they require. Look over this. If you have any questions, feel free to give me an email, and I will do my best to get back with you as quickly as I can. If you email me after 10 o'clock, chances are you will not receive a response. Have a great evening.